Okay, let's dive in. Seiko, they have this incredible reputation, don't they?
They really do.
Especially when it comes to craft and watch styles. I mean, they seem to have this real knack for it.
Absolutely. They often pull from Japanese nature, culture, sometimes these really ancient techniques.
And they weave these like amazing stories right into the watch face. We've seen it with textures, specific colors.
That's definitely one of their signature things.
Yeah.
Finding ways to make the dial the absolute focal point.
Yeah, connecting the watch to something, deeper than just telling time.
Exactly. Drawing on these craft traditions that go back centuries.
And today, we're going to unpack one specific example that really jumped out from the material you sent over.
Ah, right.
The Seiko Presage Classic Series Craftsmanship Unglazed Arita Porcelain Dial Limited Edition. Phew. SPB497.
That name definitely tells you a lot right away. It points straight to the main event.
Arita Porcelain. I know they've used that before in Presage, haven't they? Since, 2019?
They have, yeah. But the sources for this one, the SPB497, they really stress that this is using Arita porcelain in a totally new way. Unglazed.
Right, unglazed. Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. Really get under the skin of what makes this specific Presage stand out.
Especially that unglazed porcelain dial.
And pull out all the key details the sources give us: design, the movement, availability, the whole picture.
Exactly. We want to understand the why behind this choice, not just the what, but also cover, the other important specs mentioned.
Perfect. So the dial's the star, obviously, but the sources do touch on the rest of the watch. Let's maybe start with the case.
Sure. It's a steel case, described as having both brushed and polished surfaces.
Okay, dimensions.
The sources say 40.6 millimeters in diameter, and the height is 12.4 millimeters.
So kind of classic dress watch territory size-wise.
Mhm.
Pretty wearable for most people.
Yeah, I'd say so. It should sit pretty comfortably on the wrist.
And the crystal. What's protecting that special dial?
It's got a dual curved sapphire crystal that's usually good for clarity and scratch resistance.
Uh-huh. Any coating?
Yep, an anti-reflective coating on the inside surface.
Yeah.
Helps with legibility, cuts down glare, and the crown's just a standard pull-out one at 3 o'clock.
Got it. What about water resistance? Always good to know.
Rated at 100 meters,
Hmm.
which is, pretty solid for this style of watch. Fine for daily stuff. Probably not serious swimming, though.
Right, okay. Peace of mind for everyday encounters with water.
Exactly.
And the sources mentioned a see-through case back as well. Nice touch. What do we get to see?
You get a view of the movement inside. It's Seiko's in-house automatic, the caliber 6R51.
Ah, the 6R51. I think the sources mentioned that's in some other Seiko lines too.
It is, yeah. They noted it's in some King Seiko models and even that special Nasake watch they did.
So it's a movement they trust, a bit of a workhorse for them in that range.
It seems like it. It's positioned as sort of a mid-range caliber in their lineup.
Okay. And the key specs for the 6R51 that were highlighted.
Well, it beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour. And the power reserve is pretty good, 72 hours.
72 hours, 3 days. That's genuinely practical, isn't it? Especially if you rotate watches.
Definitely. It means you can take it off for the weekend, and it should still be running Monday morning.
Now, the sources said the finishing on the movement was maybe a tad industrial. What does that imply?
Yeah, that suggests it's probably not heavily decorated, with elaborate Geneva stripes or anything. More functional finishing, which isn't uncommon for calibers in this price segment.
Makes sense.
But interestingly, the sources did point out the rotor. It's gold-colored.
Ah, okay.
And they mentioned that it makes a nice visual link to the gold elements you see on the dial side.
So a little aesthetic tie-in, even with the more functional finishing.
Right. It connects the front and back visually.
Okay, let's pivot back to that dial then. The absolute centerpiece. The sources called it one of Seiko's finest in recent years. That's high praise.
It really is, especially given Seiko's reputation for dials, like you said. And it's all down to the material, Arita porcelain.
Arita porcelain. Tell us a bit more about that. It's not just any porcelain, right?
Not at all. Traditionally, Arita ware is famous for its incredibly fine texture, often quite ornate, maybe with vibrant decorations. Those blues are particularly famous.
Mm-hmm.
And the craft itself, it goes way back to the 1600s in the town of Arita. It's linked to the specific clay found there on Kyushu Island.
Wow, okay, so centuries of history baked in, quite literally, and a specific regional identity.
Exactly. And like you mentioned, Seiko has used Arita porcelain before in Presage. Models like the SPB293, SPB319.
Right.
But those dials were overglazed. They had that smooth, glossy finish you typically associate with porcelain. Shiny.
Okay, right. And this is where the SPB497 gets really distinct, according to the sources. This dial is unglazed.
That's the absolute key difference here, is what the sources really zeroes in on.
So what does leaving it unglazed actually do? What's the effect?
Well, you get this completely different feel, visually, and you'd imagine texturally. The sources describe it as a powdery cream color and a really soft texture.
Powdery cream. Soft texture. So not hard and shiny, but more matte, almost velvety.
That's the impression, yeah. A subtle, tactile quality. Gives it a different kind of warmth, maybe. Less formal than high gloss.
That sounds really appealing. A very different take on porcelain. And there's a pattern on it, too.
Yes, Seiko added a subtle pattern. It's described as a rhombus-type pattern, positioned sort of around the indices.
Okay. Is there any meaning to that?
Apparently so.
Hmm.
The sources say it's a historical symbol in Japanese culture. Represents prosperity and good health.
Ah, interesting. So another layer of meaning there.
Right. It adds a bit of visual interest and symbolism, gives some gentle depth to that soft surface, but without being, overly decorative like some traditional Arita ware might be.
It sounds like a really careful balance, taking this ancient, sometimes ornate craft and presenting it in a very restrained, almost minimalist way.
I think that's a good way to put it. Modern, but rooted.
How do the hands and markers work against that soft cream background? Do they stand out okay?
They went with a rich gold tone for the leaf-shaped hour and minute hands, and also the central seconds hand, which has that distinctive Presage crescent moon counterweight.
Uh-huh. And the hour markers?
Simple applied sticks, also in that gold tone.
That gold must really pop against the light matte dial, essential for actually reading the time, I guess.
Precisely. Provides the necessary contrast, but the gold tone itself also complements the sort of warmth of the cream porcelain.
It sounds like a really elegant pairing. The dial is clearly the hero, but the hands and markers support it rather than competing.
Yeah, the sources suggest it's very thoughtfully done. Enhances the dial, doesn't overshadow it.
So this unique watch, this execution of an ancient craft, how is it presented? What kind of strap does it come on?
It comes on a black leather strap,
Yeah.
fitted with a 3-part folding clasp. Pretty classic choice. Lets the dial do the talking.
Makes sense. Okay, let's get to the final details from the sources: limited edition status, price, availability.
Right. This SPB497 is definitely a limited edition. Production is capped at 1,200 pieces worldwide.
1,200. Okay, not a huge number. And the price?
The sources state the retail price is €1,950, including VAT.
1,950 euros and availability. If someone listening is intrigued, when could they potentially find one?
The information provided says they're said to be available starting in July 2025.
July 2025. Okay, so still a little ways off, but one to keep an eye out for.
Definitely. Through Seiko boutiques and selected retail partners globally.
Got it. So just to recap our deep dive, based entirely on the source material we covered the basics. Steel case, 40.6 millimeter by 12.4 millimeter, sapphire crystal, 100 meters water resistance.
Right, the see-through case back showing the in-house 6R51 movement with its practical 72-hour power reserve and that tad industrial finish, but the nice gold rotor tie-in.
And then we spent a good chunk of time on that really standout feature, the Unglazed Arita Porcelain dial.
Understanding its history, how this unglazed version contrasts with the traditional glazed ones Seiko used before. That powdery cream color, the soft texture, the subtle rhombus pattern.
And how it pairs with those gold-toned hands and markers. Plus the strap, the limited nature, 1,200 pieces the price, $1,950, and that July 2025 availability.
Exactly. Everything we talked about, drawn straight from the details provided in those sources.
It really showcases how Seiko keeps pushing boundaries, often by sort of looking backwards towards traditional craft, doesn't it?
It does. Taking something with such deep historical roots, Arita porcelain, and presenting it in a really contemporary context, using a technique unglazing that gives it a totally different character.
Yeah, different from what maybe most people picture when they hear Arita porcelain.
For sure.
And it kind of leaves you with a final thought to chew on. Given that Arita porcelain goes back to the 1600s, often known for this ornate glazed beauty, what does it really mean when you see this ancient art form used in such a modern, unglazed, textural way on a watch dial, like this SPB497? How does that blend, that mix of deep tradition and very contemporary application, how does that maybe shift our perception of craft, of artistry, even value in something as personal as a watch?